As we finish up our reading of Kant, I just wanted to do some review, not so much of vocabulary, but of concepts. I'm just going to go over some of the concepts that I think you should really feel comfortable working with, writing about in your own work and commentary on Kant. Just some things that I think are kind of essential. I want to start here with the first part of the Kant readings, or the first Kant readings, having to do really with kind of a logical progression that I tried to point out in Kant's thinking. And that is the logical progression from a goodwill in general, the idea of a goodwill, to duty to moral law. It's just this, it's well known that Kant, he begins this work by saying the only thing that can be considered good in itself is a good will. And that leads us to a whole view of morality as being about intentions, the will behind an action, rather than the results of the action. And that will become important when we begin to read Mill, who says that it's the results only that matter. But so the idea of a good will, that a good action or a moral action or an action that has moral worth is one that's done with a good will. But, and this is what I mean by logical progression, it's kind of a progression of questions. What is a good will? What does it mean to have a good will? And he answers that by saying that a good will is one that's done out of recognition, or a will that recognizes or is prompted by duty. That having a good will, having an intention behind an action that makes it have moral worth, is doing it out of duty. Doing it because you recognize that you must do it. That you're not doing it because you feel like doing it. You're not doing it because you hope that the action makes you happy, or even because you hope that the action makes someone else happy, but you're doing it from a good will if you do it out of a recognition of your duty to do it, that it is your duty to do it. But I've said that duty is one of those words that points beyond itself, in the sense that whenever we assert that someone has a duty, it always raises the question, duty to what? And the answer to that is the moral law. That is, the only thing, and I think it's quite an important step, that is, that the only thing that can impose a duty in this very, very strong sense that Kant thinks moral duty is, it has to be something, it can't just be another person telling me to something. If a person just says you must do that, it means nothing morally. It does not actually impose a duty upon you. Because no human being, just viewed as an individual, can have authority over you like that. The only thing that can have an authority over you, that can actually impose duties, is something that transcends humanity, something like a moral law, which doesn't rest upon the relative foundations of human authority, like being a cop or a judge or a teacher or a politician. It has to be something that we recognize as bigger than us, something that can have that kind of authority over us, that can actually impose duties. So just be familiar with this. He said that a good will is what gives an action its moral worth. And a good will is one that's prompted by duty, and duty has to be something bigger, like the moral law. In some passages in Kant, this distinction between relative value and objective value is very, very important. And for me, I like to give myself examples that are simple. And so the example that I used in my video was of the hamburger. I haven't had a hamburger since March, man. I really like to have one. So if there was a hamburger right here, it would have lots of value for me, lots of worth. But that's because I'm hungry and I crave a hamburger. If I was not hungry and didn't crave a hamburger, it would have no value. So the hamburger's value is relative to me. That is, it's conditioned on me or anyone. The hamburger has value because I'm hungry and I have a taste for hamburgers. And it could very well be that I was not hungry. I didn't have a taste for hamburgers. And then its value would just sort of disappear. It wouldn't be valuable. So, relative value is really most things in the world have relative value. They have value because we value them. But Kant says that there are other things, a much more uh, uh, rare class of things that have objective value. That is, they have value in themselves. And what does that mean? Their value does not depend upon anyone valuing them. The hamburger's value disappears if I don't value it. If something has objective value, if I don't value it, its value is completely unchanged because it's intrinsic value. It is valuable in itself. And this is incredibly important when it comes to the second version of the categorical imperative, because he said basically that it's the rational creature, which we know as the human being, but we can imagine other rational creatures who are not human. It's the rational creature that has objective value. And so, a human being, we may hate them. Maybe we should never hate anyone, but we do hate people. We may be disgusted by them. We may wish that we may wish that we never ever come in contact with them because they make us sick. I can think of one or two people, and I won't mention any names, but I still have a duty to them if I were in contact to treat them well, to never use them as a means, and to always treat them as an end in themselves. My personal aversion to them is completely irrelevant. They are a human being. They are a rational creature. Therefore, they have intrinsic value, and my feelings towards them, in terms of my duties toward them, are completely unchanged by my personal aversion. So something having relative value only has value because people value it or I value it. Something which has an objective value, it's valuable in itself. The last sort of conceptual thing I'd like to go over, just in terms of, okay, when you're writing about this, you kind of have to feel comfortable with these things, is the difference between hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives, which is absolutely key in Kant. The first thing you have to do, because we're trying to read this so that we, really feel comfortable with the ideas here, is to know what an imperative is. Absolutely key. An imperative is a command or an order. Okay, so that's the imperative part. So what's left is the hypothetical versus categorical part. Hypothetical always has an if. Hypothetical is conditional. So a command or an order that's hypothetical would be one that has a conditional or an if. Do this if you want that. Don't do that if you don't want that, right? So, as I said in the video, eat your vegetables if you want to grow up to be big and strong is a hypothetical imperative. It's conditional. So hypothetical imperatives do not command us absolutely. Because what they say is that if you want something, then you must do this. But a categorical imperative doesn't have any ifs. A categorical imperative is absolute, unconditional, and exceptionless. So a categorical imperative just says, do this, don't do that. No ifs, no conditions. And maybe the whole point of Kant's moral philosophy is to try to find some likely candidates for categorical imperatives, and there are two, right? And this is also very important. The first categorical imperative is about, I know that's a mouthful of a word, but universalizability is the only way to characterize it, I think. So whatever I do, my rule of action, she also calls my maxim of action, whatever I do, my rule or maxim of action must be such that I can will it to be a law for everyone. It's a little clearer if I wrote that. If I can't, then I know my action is unethical, immoral, and I shouldn't do it. That's the first categorical imperative about universalizability. The second one is, I would say, to be characterized as the imperative having to do with respect for persons. And can be put in different ways, but whatever I do, I should never use a person as a means to an end. I should never exploit a person. Instead, I should always treat them as an end in themselves. So we should be pretty clear. I mean, you know what means and ends mean here. The end is the purpose. The means is the way we get to a purpose. So never use a person to get something else. That's quite important. So, yeah, that's really important. The idea of difference between hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives, and what exactly that means. And then when we come to categorical imperatives, you recognize that we've been introduced to two. The first one has to do with universalizability, and the second one has to do with respect for persons. The only thing I would add at this time to this is to the second categorical imperative that what's absolutely crucial is this. The difference between things and persons, which is really comes down to one of the things that I've put aside is this discussion of animals, because he considers animals to be things, and that is a very big question. Most of us would not regard animals as things. Then again, most of us eat them, which would seem to be a kind of a inconsistency. But in any case, the difference between things and persons is key. Persons have an entirely different status than things. And we all know this. This is the idea, is that this difference is kind of saying we already know this. Because we already know this. It's built in. Because we already know that there is a difference. We don't have to be taught by Kant. He's just bringing it out.